This is a process in which an activity or undertaking becomes worldwide in scope. When you don't have the information and communication, business just goes for a standstill. Each and every country are interdependent. They are linked up. They move from one zone to another and they are dependent on each other for resources. FDI will give you a positive image in terms of investment, in terms of growth, in terms of the capital. Good morning and welcome to the first session of Unit 4 in Business Environment, and we are going to talk about the global business environment. Now, how far is that every one of us have thought that one day or the other, my business needs to reach the global level. My business has to be a business that has been respected and regarded across the globe. I never wanted to see a business that's only localized, but I always wished and happened that my business should always be on the global business front. But what exactly is this global business environment? Let's go forward and try to understand. Now, moving forward, first thing is that we are going to understand the concept of globalization. This is a process in which an activity or undertaking becomes worldwide in scope. So first of all, let's try to understand the nature of activity itself. You are trying to do a business or you are trying to do an activity which has got a worldwide presence. That's where the global business environment comes into picture. So you are not just concerned about the local geographies or the boundaries, but you want to take the business out of the boundary. You want to see that the business starts getting into every corner of the world. Followed by, it refers to the expansion of business in global market. Normally, when anybody starts a business, they start thinking about the factor that how to expand quickly, how to scale up fast and take up to the next position as far as possible. So that is where I would also bring in the process of saying the expansion coming into picture. Why? Because expansion is a very, very important factor that comes into the global business altogether. Followed by the growing economic interdependence. I would like to throw light onto this particular statement. Why? Because when we are talking about a global business environment today, each and every country are interdependent. They are linked up. They move from one zone to another and they are dependent on each other for resources. So going forward, the global interdependence is going to be one of the most interesting factors that one can ever talk about. Because if you are not going to see yourself as an interdependent, as a country which is linked through the various chains of business orders, then probably you will not be able to expand, you will not be able to grow. You just started thinking that business is like an isolated island. We could just continue doing our business as and when we are, but then that is not going to happen, because every time when we think about business, it is about interlinking. It is about a connectivity that you need to understand. Unless and until you start connecting, you will not be able to see the increasing volume, the variety of cross-border transaction, the capital flow. So today what is happening is that business is getting global in every aspect as far as possible. We are not restricting anybody to stick to its boundary, but rather we are asking everybody to become global so that your product and service is available to all the citizens across this globe. Followed by the reasons for globalization. The first reason which I would always like to say is that the rapid shrinking of time and distance across the globe. There was a time factor which I would like to talk upon, where people always thought that communication and time will require its own course. Now, for example, when you write a letter, the letter to reach a person, we need to give some time. But today, we are talking about a world where people are talking about no time. Anything and everything has to happen in that instance, in that moment. So you cannot go back and tell to this world that, I need time. The constant shrinking of time, the constant removal of barriers in terms of communication, the faster The rapid thinking in terms of connecting the world in a fraction of a second is what making the global business environment even more interesting. Today, you are in a digital economy where each and everything can happen in a flash of a second, where each and every news is being spread across as fast as possible. So this is where I'm seeing the communication factors, the technological factors that are bringing in a rapid change to the global business environment, followed by the domestic markets are no longer adequate rich. The domestic markets are able to make you understand this factor that you have completely gone on a saturated process. You have completely gone on a system, on a methodology where you will not be able to get your money, your revenue, if you're just sticking to that local market. You have to go, you have to expand yourself to the global markets as far as possible. So that's why I would always say that international markets are becoming even more interesting for each one of us. Followed by, companies may choose for going international to find political stability, to find out which is relatively good when in comparison, to get the technology and managerial know-how. So this is why this becomes very, very important for all of us. Because whenever we try to understand this factor of moving from one place to another, we also need to know what are the advantages of making the business moving from one place to another. So that's why I would say that the managerial process of knowing the business, the managerial process of making things happen as far as possible and to get the technology inbuilt, these are the factors that is going to drive the business in coming years. Companies often set up an overseas plans to reduce the high transportation costs. This is highly important and mandatory. Why? Because nowadays logistics is picking up and this is becoming a very, very important factor in terms of the business continuation, business continuity process altogether. So somewhere down the lane, what companies are able to see is that they want to reduce on the transportation costs, they want to reduce on the logistic factors, and they want to build a seamless business across the globe. Followed by, some companies set up plants overseas to be close to their raw material supply and other factors as far as possible, and to the markets of the finished products also. So reaching the customer in no time, making the customer believe that the supply is available to them at any given point, what makes the business even more interesting. Followed by the nature of globalization. What is the nature of globalization that we are talking about? Integration through interdependence, followed by free market economies. Now you start talking about the free movement of the products, the free flow of factors of production that is coming inside, standardized technology every time, that is very, very important for you, information and communication, which is yet more important. Why? Because when you don't have the information and communication, business just goes for a standstill, followed by the global corporation with global image altogether. Now, when you go through all this setup here, I would like to mention again on this factor that we are trying to come as quickly as close as possible, because the first thing itself is that we want to integrate each and every business to as simple and as networked as far as possible. So that's why we go with that word interdependence. We want to have a free market economy because nobody wants to have a market filled with barriers. Nobody wants a market that's going to challenge them in terms of entry. So we want a free market economy where your product and services will be valued by the customers directly, followed by the free movement of products. Again, no laws, no rules or regulation trying to stop a country from doing business. So I want that free movement in terms of the products, the free flow of factors of production. So when we talk about the land, labor and capital, it needs to be available in every corner of this globe, followed by standardized technology. What is the technology on which we are working? We need a constant flow of technology. We need that technology to be in place, that needs to be followed by every single country in this world. And the information and communication, that is very much important, because when we are talking about the communication aspect, the information that comes into picture, what sort of communication have you built, how have you built that factor, then followed by the global corporation and the global image. So you are trying to build a company with a global brand, a global equity altogether. Moving with, we have to talk about the economic, the political, cultural, and the environmental globalization. Now, these are the forms of globalization that actually come into picture. Why? Because when you talk about the economic or when you talk about the political factors, what is trying to happen here is that you are able to see that there is a connectivity that is coming in. There is a factor of understanding that is coming in. There is a factor of growth that is getting interlinked altogether. So all these things are very, very closely related. You cannot have an economy without political stability, without the cultural revolution happening there. So each one of these factors will make an impact in terms of the growth. Now, let's try to understand the effects of globalization. The first thing is that a liberalized international trade that we are looking into. So what do you mean by that liberalized international trade? Which means a free flow of trade that is happening. So you are able to see a liberalized international trade, an open sector where everybody is able to contribute, where everybody is able to make an entry altogether, and where everybody is able to see how the business is able to move in terms of growth, in terms of opportunity that is coming in for them. Followed by the import penetration. Are you able to import the goods that are needed for you, that are necessary for you altogether? Are you able to see a traction happening here in terms of the necessity inflow of goods? If you are able to import goods as and when you need, as per your need, as per your wants, then automatically, yes, there is an import penetration, what we are talking about. Followed by the foreign direct investment. Every nation in this world wants to attract the FDI, wants to see that a foreign direct investment coming into picture, wants to become a global hub where they are able to absorb the technology as far as possible, and they want to absorb as far as possible the amount that comes inside. Why? Because FDI will give you a positive image in terms of investment, in terms of growth, in terms of the capital altogether. Followed by the multinational companies. All those big giants wants to come over and start establishing their companies, their institutions in the place. So that's where multinational companies are becoming highly important, and their presence in the organization will definitely make a greater challenge, a greater change to the economy altogether. Followed by the competitive environment. What kind of environment are you working? Are you working in an environment which is not challenging enough? Are you working in an environment which does not have enough growth process? That's why when the Japanese opened up their economy, they wanted to see that their automobiles are being sold across the globe. Why? Because they wanted to see a competitive environment. So today in globalization, we want a competitive environment to come back and see, so that the growth happens at a faster pace. And followed by the workforce diversity. You need an organization today which is filled with a diverse background. You need to see people coming up from all walks of life so that they are able to contribute for the growth of the company. Followed by the technological environment, the nature of technology that is being used. Today, technology has got two phases which I would like to talk upon in this. The one where we are talking about the process. The other where we are talking about the machines. So technology has got this two very big phases. They've got a two different side and dimension altogether that you need to understand. One side, when you're using all those high-end tools, machines, gadgets to make your business move faster. The other side, you are connecting it with processes, apps. So where you are able to now see that an integration that is happening between manufacturing and the services. There was a time when people were not really concerned about the services business, but today, every manufacturing business needs to connect to the service background immediately. So what is happening here is that the technology is becoming the integrator, which is connecting the manufacturing and service together in order to increase the productivity of the firm. followed by the advantages of globalization. Now, productivity grows more quickly when countries start producing goods and services which they have a comparative advantage. Living standards can go up, and probably when you start talking about the global competition and the imports, keep a lid on the prices, so inflation is likely to derail on the economic growth. So what is happening is that when you start seeing this inflation, when you start seeing a negative effects of the economy suddenly pouncing upon, automatically the business starts taking a standstill and they start coming down. Now, productivity grows more quickly only when countries are able to produce goods and services in which they have a comparative advantage, because that is what we need. That is what we exactly need to understand. You need to have that comparative advantage. You need to have the presence which can tell you that you are better than others in terms of production. When you see, for example, China, they had the comparative advantage of making manufacturing better than other countries. They were quick to replicate, they were quick to come into the market and quick to go forward in terms of dumping the product. So they had a comparative advantage of pushing the products faster into the market compared to any other country, and that's what made their economy to grow fast. So similarly, every country in this world needs to have a comparative advantage. With this, I come to the end of the first session. I hope and believe that in this session, the information that has been shared and has been told to you is of a great help and resource to you. In the upcoming sessions, we are going to learn more about the international economic environment and the political environment, which is very, very important in terms of making your business more stabilized and more growth-oriented altogether. Until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me on this wonderful session.